Hello, welcome to the Journal of Stories podcast. I am your host, Elder Van Cott. I am a service missionary for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. On this podcast, I collect life stories and testimonies from many different people with diverse backgrounds. So I hope you'll join me in learning and growing from these powerful stories. On to the episode. Welcome to the Journal of Stories podcast, and thank you for letting us do this interview in your beautiful house.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Mm-hmm. What's the story behind your house?
My wife and I had it built for us when we moved out here from Salt Lake City. We had a daughter whose husband had passed away, and she was quite sick and couldn't live by herself. She has multiple sclerosis, bad case. And so she couldn't live with us in town because our house is all stairs. Everybody was all stairs. Mm-hmm. And she was pretty incapacitated that way. So we had this house built. My wife went to an architect she liked, and she designed the house with him and told him what she wanted and how we were going to do it. And so we got the whole house built and moved into it here. And we moved in the fall of 1997. So it's been here, 25 years now.
Who are your parents, and where did they live when you were born?
They lived in Salt Lake City when I was born, but I had uncommon good luck, and my father was really smart. He moved us away before I was a year old. I grew up all over the West, but I was actually born in Salt Lake City. And all the time I was growing up, and most time when my wife and I were together, we lived out in the West somewhere. We would come every year. We'd come to Salt Lake City to visit the grandparents and the rest of the family who lived here. So I knew my way around Salt Lake City all right. My dad's parents were pioneers who ended up in Logan. I mean, they came with the pioneer handcart companies, and they ended up in Logan. So that's where I was actually born in Logan, and my parents left it there, but. I never lived here as a kid. So my dad moved away before I was a year old. I never lived here again until we moved here We moved here about 1982, 83 when we moved out here from Washington. So I'd never lived here myself. Been here a lot to visit people, but never on my own. So.
Yeah. What were your parents like when you were growing up?
Well, they were pretty faithful members of the church. My dad was. He was a missionary in Germany when he met her. She was in Germany, being raised. He met her there, and when he came home, about a year later, she came over to the United States, and they got married. So he was always very active in the church. He liked the church, and he had lots to do. We went to church every Sunday where we lived. If there was a church, we'd go there. We moved a lot. I never lived any place more than about 2.5, 3 years. All the time I was growing up, we moved a lot. So, But he's pretty active in the church. Passed away a few years ago, but not really.
Yeah. What was the main part of your childhood? You mentioned how you moved a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. What do you the main part, like the location, or?
Just whatever you want to tell about it, the story.
The story is moving a lot. My dad was, he worked with Bureau of Reclamation, the dam builders of the federal government. And we moved a lot. He was very active in that. And so every place we went, there was some kind of project underway that he was working on. And we just moved a lot. We lived in... some of the places I remember the most was El Paso, Texas. We lived there. It was during World War II. We lived in El Paso, Texas. And we would go to Juarez every Sunday or every Saturday and go to the store and buy groceries for our dinner on Sunday in El Paso, because you could buy stuff that you couldn't get in the United States. They didn't have the rationing there. You could buy anything you wanted that was in the store. So you go there and we'd buy a lot of groceries there. And he was pretty active in the church all along. So
yeah,
there was a few times we lived at a place where there wasn't hardly any church there, but we would when we moved into New Mexico for a while, when we first got there, there was another LDS couple, and they got together and formed some kind of little group, and we ended up when we left there was a branch there. When we left there 3 years later, there was a branch of the church there. So I grew up with a lot of church in my background, and we would come to every year. We would come to Utah to visit my dad's parents and my mother's parents, who had moved here from Germany too, and we would go to church and do all those kinds of things. Like you couldn't, if you lived in a place like El Paso, you didn't see a lot of church except on Sunday afternoon. You'd go to church, but that was all there was going.
Who were you as a teenager?
Okay. Who was I? Well, for one thing, my middle name was Ivan, and I went by that name until I was graduated from college. Before that, everybody called me Ivan. And we moved in a lot. We moved around a lot when I was young. We didn't go to church. When we lived in Tucumcari, the closest church was in some other town in New Mexico. I can't think of the name. Clovis, I think it was. We would go there maybe once a month. We'd get in the car and drive there, spend a whole day, go to church, then come home. And then in other places we lived, there was a regular, like we lived in El Paso for a few years, and it was a regular church. I used to go to church with me. But I kind of, going to church was a thing. Just did. If there was one there, you went to it. If there wasn't, you stayed home. That's about it. We didn't have church in the house or anything like that. We just stayed home. And I was I went through all the Aaronic period. I was a deacon and a teacher, and all. We went through all steps. Yeah, when we lived in Denver, I would go to primary. In those days, primary was a big deal. It still is a big deal, but that was it. And its own afternoon. You go spend the whole afternoon, a weekday, in primary meetings and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was in Boy Scouts, except most of the places we lived, there wasn't any church troop there, so I just go to the other regular Boy Scout groups. When we lived in Denver, the wards in Denver always had their own scout troop. But
what do you remember from that?
Being a Boy Scout?
Yeah.
Well, there wasn't a whole lot going on. Most of the places I went, I was the only guy there, so we didn't do a lot of scouting stuff. But when we lived in Denver, we went to, the ward had its own church there. The church was there, and we had our own scout troop there. We would go go camping, and we'd go hiking, and we'd go skiing in the wintertime and all that. It was kind of fun with the church kids. It was kind of fun. I like that. Being a Boy Scout was kind of different then than it is now, I think, quite a bit. We really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I got to be an Eagle Scout and did the whole bit, so.
Yeah.
Other than that, I guess I always had, as I look back at it, I think I always had a testimony of the church, But it was different to being in a ward. We had lots of activities for the kids. There was not much to have to do being a kid, so. But my parents took care of me and made sure I went to church and said my prayers and behaved myself, so. Church was always kind of a big thing in our family. It was important. My mother was a convert. She was in Germany. When my dad was a missionary, he taught her, and she joined the church in Germany before he came home.
So, did you go on a mission?
I did. My wife and I went on a mission in 2001 we went on a mission. I didn't go on a mission because in those days, it was during the war. in college, when I was college age, you couldn't go. You'd get drafted. I had to take ROTC in college to stay out of the draft, and then couldn't go on a mission because they wouldn't recognize, they weren't letting missionaries go. They had to do the deal. So I went to college, took ROTC in college, and then when I got graduated, I got commissioned. And then after we got married, my wife and I went on active duty for 2 or 3 years with the Army.
Mm-hmm.
But as going on missions, if I remember right, each ward was allowed to have one missionary out, because I think probably some kind of a deal that they each cut with the Army or the government about. Most of them went on active duty somewhere or took ROTC to stay out of it. That's why I went to college, and I signed up and took ROTC for 4 years while I was in college, just to stay out of the draft, It was interesting in college, the students in my class, they were either veterans who'd been overseas and come back already, or they were LDS kids who were taking ROTC to stay out of the draft, so they didn't have to go on active duty. I went on active duty after we got married in July, and the following January is when I started actually it was in February I got called to active duty in February after we graduated. So I did a little over 2 years in the Army. So
Yeah. What did you do while you were active duty?
I was in the Corps of Engineers. In the Corps of Engineers commissioned, and I spent some time at Fort Belvoir, Virginia, which was the headquarters of the Corps of Engineers in those days, getting trained and ready and things like that. And then I went to Beale Air Force Base. In those days, the Air Force didn't have its own engineers, and so the Army still built their stuff for them. We were building Beale Air Force Base in those days didn't have any airplanes. There's no runways. They had a lot of ground, but nothing they could use for it. So we went out there. I was out there with the Corps of Engineers building Air Force Base for the Air Force. And I was there. Most of my active duty time was doing that, and then after that, I came back to Fort Carson, Colorado. Just ready to Corps of Engineers stuff. I didn't do anything not building anything, or just being ready for combat. It was. I never got to go overseas or anything. I'm a veteran of the Korean War, officially, and that's how on the Army records I'm a Korean veteran. So, and then I stayed in the reserve program for quite a few years. I retired from the military altogether after about 23 years of service, most of it in the Army Reserve. And most of that time is when we lived in Washington, D.C., and that's where the headquarters of the Corps of Engineers is there, in the Pentagon and things like that. And I taught classes for them, did other things like that for them. I did my active duty every summer. You had to go 2 weeks every summer to go on active duty. And I would go to the Pentagon for 2 weeks or someplace like that for just to teach classes and things like that. Yeah, an interesting, not a very. I didn't do any physically challenging things in the Army. It's not like we're not out fighting war or anything like that. Just doing what the Corps did. So.
And you were married at that point, right?
Yeah, we got married. It was quite a weekend. I had graduation and a marriage all in one weekend from college. And my wife went to university. I went to University of Denver. So I went to school at University of Denver. And my wife went to school there too. She was not a member then. She was not a member of the church. But we met there and fell in love and got married. But we got married, actually the week after I graduated, we got married at her hometown in Colorado. And we stayed together for many, many years. She died in 2019. So we were married all that time. 2054 to 2019, we were married. Well, about 1954 to 2019.
Yeah.
It's a long marriage, yeah.
How did you meet her?
In a bar. That was my favorite Relief Society story. In those days, every place we went to church, we'd go to my wife's Relief Society. They always had some one year. They had some kind of meeting. Everybody, let's hear. They'd get around and have dinner. And one of the things you had to do there was everybody had to tell how they met each other.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't meet in Sunday school. We didn't meet in primary. We met in a bar. Oh. I kind of like telling that story because it kind of got everybody's attention,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we met. It was a fraternity party being held in a bar at that particular moment. There was some other, about 4 couples of us that got together and went to this event in Denver. And that was our first time we ever met each other was at the bar. She was there with somebody else. I had a date, but I don't know. I can't remember even who it was. But I remember my wife who I met there, and we really well, and we went. I was just starting my 3rd year at college when that started. So she just started her first year, and I was starting my 3rd year when we were in college when we met. We were together a lot during the next 2 years, and then, like I said, the week I graduated, we got married. Been together ever since then. We got married and went the next weekend. We moved to Wichita, Kansas is where we lived when we first got married. I worked for Beach Aircraft Company then. It was my first job out of college was working for Beach Aircraft Company, and we moved there and lived there for a few months, and then we went back to Fort Belvoir, Virginia. And then I got sent to Beale Air Force Base, and on the way driving back from Beale Air Force Base to from Fort Belvoir, Virginia to Beale Air Force Base, Virginia, on the way we stopped and got sealed in the Logan Temple. She joined the church shortly after we got married. She joined the church, and then we got sealed in the temple on the way back from Virginia to California. We went and got sealed.
What's the story of the family that you guys made together?
What's the story of it? Well, we had 3 kids in just a little over 3 years. Our first girl was a girl. Her name was Cliff Barrett, and she was born in California when we were living out there. And not when I was in the Army, before we got in the Army. It was after we got in the Army, because I went in the Army. I had to do when we were. Actually, our daughter was born while we were in the Army. Yeah. She got born at Beale Air Force Base in the hospital there. And then our son was born in Denver. So anyway, we have 3 kids right off the top right there, and then we spent the rest of our time raising them. Good kids. We always had the 3 kids. Our daughter was the oldest one, then my son, and then the youngest one was another girl who was born in Denver. After we got out of the Army, we moved to Denver and went to work, and she got a job. I got a job there in Denver, and she was born that year, or shortly after we got out of the Army. So her name was Jackie. And we had a pretty good street. Grew up in the church. They all had. We lived most of our lives, in our married lives, we lived in towns that had cities. where there was church, we lived in California for a while, and then we lived in Virginia for several years. And they went to church there. And all three of them were active in the church. All three of them got married, had temple marriages when they got married. And they've come a long time. They've raising these kids for a long time. Like my daughter's in her 60s, and they're all older. They were all married in the temple, sealed in the temple. And then our son, he's the one that he fell away from the church. He and his wife got divorced, and he's very inactive. He still has church membership, but he doesn't ever go to church or anything. He stays out of the church. And doesn't want to. It's not that he doesn't admit being a Mormon. He just doesn't ever talk about being a Mormon. But he and I both know he's been to the temple, all that. He went with me to the open house at the Deseret Temple one day. He and his wife. It's kind of interesting. He lives in Denver now. My son lives in Denver. No, he doesn't. He lives here. He lives in Draper, where he lives now. He and his wife live in Draper. And my oldest daughter, lives in Perry, which is down by Brigham City. And she's very active in the church. She just got home from her mission. She and her husband were on a mission. They were on a mission when my wife died in 2019. They were on a mission in Germany, and not in England is where they were on a mission. And they actually got permission. They came home from their mission, came home for the funeral and all that, and they went back to finish their mission. And our son by that time had become completely inactive in the church and didn't want anything to do with the church. He married another lady who was a member of the church. They got married, and her son went on a mission. My son paid for his mission, but that was the only thing he wanted to do. But he's very inactive in the church now. When he went to the temple with me, to the temple dedication, it was a very moving experience for him. He's kind of sat there. We went to as you went through the routine, one of the things you do is you went to one of the sealing rooms, and the people gave a little talk about what sealing was all about. And he just sat there and cried. That's what he said. It was a moving experience for him. I'm glad I took him, and it made me feel good to see him have that experience. So. But he's not active in the church. And then our youngest daughter, she and her husband got married in the temple and were sealed. And very soon on in their marriage, she became quite ill. She had it was the beginnings of I can't think of the name of the disease she had. She was pretty sick, and she ended up dying before they had any children. So they didn't have any children of their own. But they lived about 2 blocks from us. We lived in Salt Lake City. They lived about 2 blocks away from us. And then he passed away, and she couldn't live by herself in the house because she couldn't take care of herself. She had multiple sclerosis, is what she had. Multiple sclerosis is what she had. And we got, we built this house, and she moved out here with us. And we only lived here about a year, and she passed away.
So, what are you most grateful for?
Ooh. Well, one of the things I think about a lot nowadays is I'm so grateful that my wife and I were lucky enough and able to get along enough to stay married as long as we did. And then we went to the temple very early on, and then we were sealed. And our children are sealed to us. And I'm grateful for that blessing, because I think in the final end, it's all going to work out all right in the end. But I'm grateful for the support we've gotten from the church the whole time, for the testimonies we have. that's about it. We went, my wife and I, we went on our mission. That was back in the days when senior missionaries were still missionaries. We were the last ones, I think, in that mission actually went out and did tracting and knocked on doors and held street meetings and did all that stuff. I think nowadays they don't do anything like that. They do other things, but we were really door knocking, meeting holding missionaries. We really enjoyed that. We were in Vienna, Austria, which is not very big on church. It's not a. In those days, at least, in the early 2000s, there was not that many churches. There were several wards there, but they were all most of the members of the church there were refugees from some other country had come to Vienna for freedom. We lived in a ward that was probably, I think the membership was probably 80% either African or Filipinos. They'd come there for religious reasons. And that's the kind of mission we had, was helping them. Then we also did a lot of street meetings and tracking, like missionaries did in those days. That's not like doing service mission, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I quite enjoyed it all. It was neat. One of the things that my wife and I, Lee and I, always we talked about frequently and really enjoyed it, was knowing that no matter what happened to us individually, we were going to be together in the next life, because we were sealed to each other, and we'd be married and we'd be together again. And I still think about that. Since she's gone already and she's on the other side, I look forward to going. It's a challenge. I need to keep myself 100% ready to go, But that's one of the things I really enjoyed about all the events that have happened in my life, was I could always fall back and the church would pick me up and keep me going. Things would go good. So I look forward to that.
What is the one thing that you want your children and grandchildren to know?
I want them to know that we're all going to be together in the next life. And in order to make that work, they all have to do their share of getting ready for it. But I really want them to know and believe that this life is really kind of a temporary thing when you stop to think about it in the long term. I mean, when you get to be my age, you kind of really recognize that. But the younger ones, there's a different mixture of kids. I got some grandkids who are completely inactive in the church. And I've got some others who are completely into it, and they've been to the temple. They go temple a lot nowadays because they get time, and there's temples around to go to. So the whole range of things there, but I think I hold on to the belief, and I really think it's going to happen, that in the final end, they're all going to come together. We'll go together on the other side, is what I'm thinking. Because I think they're all smart enough to know that, and they have testimonies of it. It's just, they have to live their lives right to get there to make it. So they're working on that.
Mm-hmm.
I have 2 grandkids who are married to people who are not members of the church, but they're very active, and they take their husbands to church with them when they can, and sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. But I think in the end, it's all going to work out. That's how I kind of feel. I think the Lord will work with them and get them to. I think I see it happening. To tell you the truth, I see some changes in their personality and their thinking, and I think someday they'll realize what they need to do to keep together with their wife, they'll straighten out and come to church. That's what I think will happen.
How has service blessed your life?
Service? Like, do you mean like church service or?
Yeah, just serving other people.
Well, it's a real blessing, I think. Depends on my career working was as an engineer, working in water resource development and power development and things like that. And one of the things I recognize is that when I do that job, and if I do it well, I'm making it possible for a lot of other people to live better. They got water to drink and power for their lights, things like that. So I've been very lucky in my life to have a job which I can see benefits other people. If the job's done well, how do you feel that about it? And I see that happening all the time. And right now I'm involved a little bit in some water projects for Indian tribes. And then you see, it blesses those people to do that kind of work. So I kind of like that part of my work career has been that way. And on the church side, seeing how the church blesses the lives of other people in ways you wouldn't even imagine. But it's amazing to me to see people from, I saw this a lot on our mission, people from other countries who have been oppressed all their lives and have been basically almost like, they're not slaves, but they're not accepted in the society they live in. They're made to work hard, and they work hard and all that. But I see that their membership in the church really blesses them to see that there's other ways to live, and in the final end, it's going to be working out all right for them. So I see that helping a lot with people I've worked with or we've been with because of our mission in the church, but also because of my work has taken me all over the world too. I've gone a lot of places different places in the world on trips and sometimes on extended trips. And it's always amazing to me to see how the church being present in some part of the world like that changes people's lives and helps them to realize what's really going on in this world. I really enjoy that, and it's not easy to deal with sometimes. It's kind of hard to you got to treat them with a lot more respect than you would some church members almost, because these people really need the help and they need it. I believe in that. So I think just being a member of the church and all the things I've been taught and all the things I've learned have made me just appreciate life so much more than I would otherwise,
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I'm having problems with right now is, especially in the last couple of weeks, I'm having a lot of mental problems. I'm trying to remember people's names. And I'll wake up in the middle of the night and who's that person? I can't even think of their name, and it really bothers me, I woke up this morning thinking I need to call. I still do some work. I do some consulting work. And I still have what you call a boss, She's in charge of the program. And I couldn't even think of her name. It really irritated me. I go, what in the world is her name? Why can't you think of it? It really bothers me. And in the last week, I've had that happen 2 or 3 times. People I should really know who they are, and I can't think of their name. I'll get another example. My youngest daughter, her husband was not a member of the church, but he was a nice guy. He was not a member of the church, and his parents were not members of the church either. And they lived in Florida. And I was thinking, well, I need to send them a Christmas card. I could not think of their name. You're in the bed and you're just like, what in the world's going on? What's going wrong with my mind? I can't remember anything like that. And then about 2 hours later, it came to me, it hits me. Oh, yeah, Push. Push is her name. That's the lady's name. Jeannie Push. Oh, that was my son-in-law's wife, my son-in-law's mother. And it really irritates me to think of all that stuff I can't remember. And the last few weeks, I've had a lot of problems like that. I go to church, there's a lot of people I know, but I can't think of their name. It's really, I don't know why that is. It's kind of discouraging, to tell you the truth. People come up to you and they're being really nice and greeting, Brother Barrett, how you doing? I'm doing fine. What's your name? I can't think of it. I don't want to ask them what their name is either. That's embarrassing. But it's hard to deal with. I think it's, I'll be 92 in another February. Valentine's Day in February, I'll be turning 92. Valentine's Day is my birthday. I'll turn 92 on Valentine's Day. And I keep thinking, well, there's something's gone really wrong with me. The things I can't think of, people's names I should know.
Well, is there a story from your life that you haven't shared yet that you would want to?
Not really, no. I don't think so. Well, as I say, one adventure I had that really, my wife and I had that really strengthened our testimonies a little bit was we were on a trip to, I can't think of the name of the country now. In Europe, one of the southern countries in Europe, which is, it was in Africa actually where we were. And we were on a trip, a business trip for me, and she was with me just to go along on the ride, She liked to she liked to be friendly with people. She always carried her purse with she had a big bag of candy in her purse, and we'd be out, and she'd give candy to little kids, and they just loved that. One time we were in this place, I can't think of the name of the country now, but it's a tough spot. And we were walking down the street because we just wanted to go for a walk. We walked down the country road, and we soon come across a bunch of kids. And my wife said, "Oh," we didn't speak their language, but she gave them all some candy, to keep, they were all happier than anything. And then we kept walking, and they got more candy. I gave you all the candy, and they got mad at her and started throwing rocks at her because she didn't have enough candy for them. And so, and then I jumped in, and we kind of got it all stuff, and we walked away. And I said, that's really strange, How do you put up with that kind of thing, But the thing that the experience taught me that people who don't really know what they're doing tend to do bad things, like throw rocks at you. And you can either get mad and beat them or hit them, or you can just try to be nice about it and walk away. And that's what we did. We just walked left them walking while they were throwing rocks at us, but we were walking away. And then you figure, what's wrong with these kids? Well, they just probably get the first piece of candy they ever had in their life, and then all of a sudden you leave them, they're going to get mad at you and they throw a rock at you. So you have to learn a lot of patience to get along with other people. But I think what you have to do really is recognize that they're all sons and daughters of our Heavenly Father. And no matter how bad they're acting, it's not their fault. It's because of the way they've been trained, or lack of trained or not trained, or the life they've had. And when you realize, when you go around the world, a lot of people don't have as good a life as we do. They got really tough lives. And they appreciate help. And what you have to do is be ready to give them the help they want, and also recognize that they don't accept it, and they'll be mad, but don't worry about it. That's my thing is that Heavenly Father will help them, but we need to help them too. That's my thinking.
Thank you. So I have a closing tradition for this podcast.
Yeah.
Where the last guest will write a question in this journal for you or for the next guest.
Uh-oh.
So here's the question that was left for you. Where are you going next in your journey as a pilgrim in the gospel?
Where am I going next as a pilgrim in the gospel? Well, a simple answer might be, it's like one just happened to me. I'll go where the Lord wants me to go. Hopefully. It takes courage and faith to do it, but you can do it. But the latest calling I have in church, I haven't had a calling in church for quite a while. I got called by the bishop to be a Sunday school teacher. Well, not a Sunday school teacher, but a Sunday school teacher's advisor, I guess, or protector, I guess. We have every class in Sunday school has a teacher, and then they have the assistant teacher, whose biggest job is to keep peace in the family. I think is the biggest thing I understand. Because the kids get mad at the teacher, then you try to smooth it over so right, and you ought to make sure the teacher's doing the right thing and not. It's just a matter of just being there and kind of being I don't know what you'd call it. It's not like being a teacher. It's being more like sometimes like being a referee between fights, But that's one of the most interesting experiences I've had in the church. I've had a lot of different kind of callings. I've been on a high council. I've done all kinds of things. But this one is the one that, to me, is probably the most challenging one of all. It's trying to not get mad at the kids because they're mad at the teacher. Don't get mad at them too, It's strange. I don't know how to describe that, but it's a different kind of experience for me. Keeps on. It's like providing a different adult in a kid's Sunday school class. What it's like. And I'm not sure the kids even know why I'm there, That's the thing. It's a new thing in the church. I don't know what they. But every class now has what they call an assistant teacher in it. Anyway, well, the thing I've learned from it is, if the bishop says we need you to go do this, go do it, and the Lord will help you do it. He might make it not easy, and he may make it embarrassing, and he may make it tough, but if you do what you know what you're supposed to do and try real hard and pray about it, then the Lord will help you do it. It's one of the most difficult callings I've ever had in the church.
All right. Well, Cliff, thank you for letting me interview you.
I'm glad to do it. I'm happy to hope it helps you.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Alrighty. Thank you.
You're welcome.